In support of the Student Loan Scheme Exemptions and Miscellaneous Provisions Amendment Bill. That's actually the bill we're talking about, and unfortunately some of the opposition keep mentioning other ministers in the House. It's actually, this one is in the name of the Revenue Minister, Peter Dunn. So it would be very helpful if the opposition could remember that. This is a bill in the name of the Minister of Revenue. It's a technical bill that is making some changes. So yes, I'm very pleased I'm able to remind you and correct the error of your ways on that side of the House. Now, there is one thing that I do want to agree with today. I do want to agree with the former Speaker from the Labour benches, saying that education is the cornerstone of economic growth. Now, clearly under a national government we totally agree with that. Education's a massive platform for us growing our economy, and we're extremely committed to having in place a student loan scheme that's balanced. But the important thing, Mr. Speaker, it's also about putting the right incentives in place and supporting and enabling people to pay off their student loan quicker. So I just wanted to put this particular bill in the second reading, put a bit of context around it. We've heard from the Minister of Revenue that more than 500,000 New Zealanders have a student loan. 500,000. Now that's a huge amount. So on the one side, it's fantastic that there's been that number of uptake, and that obviously the number of people in tertiary education is strong in this country, and we need it to be. But, you know, one of the difficulties is when you've got that many New Zealanders who have a student loan, that's a significant impact on our economy. And I want to remind the other side of the House that it's hard-working New Zealanders who pay tax that funds the student loans. Right. So it's not just the poor students with student loans, it's the poor, hard-working New Zealanders who pay tax from their incomes to support the student loans. So that's another important context that I want to put across. Yeah, the government's money, it's just this money that's growing on trees that everyone gets to write fat cheques out of. Well, no, it's hard-working New Zealanders who are funding student loans. That's right. So when National came into government, it was concerned that under Labour there'd been no incentives whatsoever for people to repay their loans earlier. So what that meant was that loan holders were likely to be in debt for longer, and that's something that we know is not good for anyone, and that had implications and flow-on effects for other areas of their lives. You know, delaying choices about when to have a family, if to have a family, whether to buy a house or not. So National has fulfilled its election commitment to keep interest-free student loans for tertiary students. And part of that was also building in the incentive, a strong incentive for students to pay off their debts faster. Now that's a great behaviour for us to be rewarding, because we do believe that education is the cornerstone of economic growth. So in effect there's three areas in this bill that I wanted to touch on. First was the interest-free loans for the realm countries, particularly important to me. There's a large Pacific Island population in the electorate of Taupo, and so I'm very keen to support the development of education for those people as well. The second part is the overseas study, and I want to talk about a constituent case that I've had in my Cambridge office with someone who was wanting to study overseas. And the third part is the minor and technical amendments, which for some reason the other side of the House seems to think is unimportant or boring, but they are important, very important technical changes to this bill. So let's have a look at the first part of it, which is the interest-free loans for residents of realm countries. Now, many of the speakers today have talked, Mr. Speaker, about the importance of our support for Pacific countries. So what this means is that borrowers in realm countries will be exempt from the requirement that they're present in New Zealand to qualify for the interest-free loan. Now, this is fair. It makes a lot of sense. And what it does is it recognises the special relationship that we have with the realm countries. So if we go back a step and just have a look at when interest-free loans were introduced in 2006, it was encouraging borrowers to remain in or come back to New Zealand. So that was part of the intention. Niue, the Cook Islands and the Tokelau have a special relationship with New Zealand, which gives them this automatic right to reside here and to work here. So what we wanted to do was to extend the interest-free loans to borrowers residing in these countries to recognise that special relationship. So that's the first part of the bill around interest-free loans for residents in realm countries. The second part relates to overseas study, and there was some very interesting discussion in the Select Committee around this particular part of the bill. And one of the issues is that when you have someone who's wanting to study overseas, it's not generally that they want to study overseas. They want to extend their existing study, and sometimes that the course that they're interested in isn't available here in New Zealand because of the speciality or it's a very technical field that they're wanting to pursue. And I've had this very case in my own electorate with a constituent come to see me. Her daughter wanted to study a very specialised field. It wasn't available here in New Zealand. So, we don't want to be in a position where we're restricting the student's choice for extending their study options. So what this does, it introduces an extension of the interest-free loan entitlement to those students who are studying overseas full-time, and there's a formal exchange program in place with the New Zealand government and that education provider. So it means that the students who are wanting to pursue further studies in very specialised fields have that option available to them. And as I said, in my own electorate of Taupo, that was very relevant, and this particular clause will be helpful for that student. So the third part, and this is, some would say, or the other side would say that this is the not so exciting bit. Well, I totally disagree. I think the minor technical amendments are a critical part of this bill, and there's several parts of it. The Green member spoke about hardship, and it's fair to say that many New Zealanders are experiencing hardship at the moment. This particular one looks at students who are repaying their loans and makes some minor changes so that currently the relief is limited to the year immediately preceding the current tax year. So what we as a government want to do is to make sure that students know about their obligations in terms of their debt. We've provided incentives for them to be able to repay their debts earlier. In terms of the changes here, we're also, there will be some students, unfortunately, who have failed to have the correct deductions made or need to pay amounts that are due. So there's been a change in the deduction rate, and also some other areas around early repayment of the loan and the grace period. So, Mr. Speaker, this is an important piece of legislation, and I'm proud to support it in the second reading.
Mr. Speaker. Grant.